Right, so the next thing that we need to do is we need to start putting in our controls. And one thing I did notice after we mirrored over is that everywhere where we had an L in the word ear, it actually did turn those into L's as well. So I went ahead and renamed all that stuff too. So it's not always foolproof every time with the renaming, but it does make it a lot easier if you have a bigger character with a lot more joints. So at this point, we need to start making controls. And what these are going to be is just little NURB circles that we are going to attach to parts of the skeleton to make it easier to set our keyframes when we go to start animating. Because you never want to actually set keyframes on your joints and your IK handles directly. You always want to have some kind of control in place that is going to make it easier to select those through the mesh of your joint and to set up some other controls on it too and just make it easier to work with. So the first one that we're going to make is I'm just going to go up to create. I'm actually just going to pull this off because we're going to need this NURB circle a few times. Actually, you know what? I'll just duplicate them. It'll be fine. So let me go back up and get it again because I do need the first one. Let me get this circle. So this circle is going to be our first controller. We're going to make it kind of big like this on the ground. And this is going to be the main controller or the God control. Because everything else is going to be parented to this, and when we want to move the whole character somewhere else, we are going to select it by the God control and move it. So we're going to just call this God control. It's God underscore CTRL. This is how we're going to name our controllers. So again, with the naming conventions being so important and that they're consistent, that's what we're going to do controllers. So underscore CTRL. So that's our first one. And then the second one, I'm going to just duplicate this and I'll move it up. And I'm actually just going to hold down V and just snap it to that IK handle right there, or to that joint. So if you hold down V, you can snap things right to the joints just like that. And this, I'm going to make it a little smaller because it's just going to control the body. And so we're going to rename this. We're going to take out that one and just say the word body. That's going to be our body controller. And then what we can do with this is we can turn it a little bit if we need to, or if we need to do a little bit of a bend back and forth. Maybe if you lift it up a little to make him a little taller, if he's like looking over something high or something like that. So that's the controller we're going to use for that. And then I'm going to duplicate this again and lift this up, and this is going to be what our ear controls are going to be. So I'm going to go ahead and snap this to that joint right there. And then it's way too big and it's not at the right angle either. So I'm going to just angle this so it kind of matches with the ear, and then make this quite a bit smaller. So it's just barely on the other side of the ear like that. So that'll be fine. And this is going to be our right ear control. So we'll take out that one there, and then I'm going to say R underscore ear, and then we have our underscore control right there already in place. And then I'm going to do this from the front view because it'll be easier to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to duplicate this circle and then snap it over here to that joint, and then I'm just going to rotate it so it kind of lines up and is symmetrical with the other one. It doesn't have to be perfect, but close is good enough. And this is my left ear control. So I'm going to change that just like that. And then the last controller that we're going to need is the one by the tail. So I'm going to actually just come over to this side, and I will select my God control and duplicate that. And then I will snap that to the end of my tail here. Just to make sure that's snapping where I want it. It's a little bit hard to tell, but yeah, I think that's where I want it to be. Yeah. So we'll go back to our side view, and then again I will rotate this so that it sort of lines up with the body, and then we can make this quite a bit smaller. Something like that is probably good. And then that is going to be our tail control. So we'll rename this so that's our tail control. So we have the controls created, and these are kind of going to be the puppet strings that we use to animate everything. But there's quite a lot more setup that we need to do on these controls. And the first thing is we have to, because do you see how we have different scales, and we have all kind of information over here in the channel box. So we have to freeze our transforms. So important to freeze your transforms on your controls, because that determines what the default position of your controls are, and you're probably going to need that while you're animating. You always want to be able to go ahead and select something and put 0 in everything and bring it back to the default. But the only way that you can do that is if you first, before you do anything else to set them up, is to freeze the transforms. So that's really important to do that right then. So now we're going to take a look at these, and the tail control, that's the most complicated one to set up, because the way that I'm going to show you is we're going to make a really cool swishing control with your tail, so you can have a big tail wags that look cool. But that is the most complicated, so we are going to save that for last. And then I'm just going to go ahead and show you how to set up these other things, and how to attach them to the skeleton, and then also parent them to each other so that they all move at the same time. So when you are trying to attach your controls to a skeleton or an IK handle, you want to use the parent constraint for that. So like these IK handles, right? We want to control them with these circles. So if I select this circle, I'm going to shift select the right, we're looking at the right ear IK handle, and then do a parent constraint. So now when I select this and I move it, it's going to pull on that IK handle. Well, and it's going to move your ear. So it's going to look a lot better after we bind the skeleton to the joints, but you can see you get movement there. And that's what we want. So we're going to do that same thing to the other side. I'm going to select the left ear control and shift select the left ear IK. Oops. And then do a parent constraint. And what you can see, if you look at our IK handles, they now have these parent constraints under them. And so now we know that they're constrained to another object, and that's going to be our controllers. And then you want to do the same thing for the body. You want to constrain that to the body joint. So you want to select the controller first, and I'm going to hold down control and select the body joint, and then parent constraint. So now, again, like we can sort of get a little stretch maybe if we want, or we can rotate this if we want to, and it will start to kind of bend the ball in the middle a little bit if that's what we need. And then we don't really need to constrain anything to the God control, because we're going to later on going to parent everything to that. But we need to constrain this controller to this joint in here. So go ahead and grab that joint. That's the tail one, I believe. Yeah. Where is my tail one? There we go. And parent constraint on that too. So now we can do a very basic kind of tail wag with that. We're going to make that a lot better later. And so we have all of our controls sort of attached to our skeleton. But now, like I said, we want to make it to where if we move this God control, it moves everything, but it doesn't do anything right now. So we have to start parenting our controls together. And this is where it kind of gets tricky for some people. when you are attaching your controls to your joints and your IK handles, you want to use parent constraint. But if you want to attach one control to the other one, you want to use regular parenting. Just P, just like we did with the joints. So like both of these ear controls, I'm going to select both of these, and then I'm going to shift select the body, and then I'm going to parent them. So now when we move this, like when we want to rotate this, it's going to rotate the ears as well. So because if we hadn't done that, oops, then like if we had just parented it to the directly to the God control, then this wouldn't be able to control the ears and it would not work. I'm going to go ahead and see if I can show you that. Yeah, if we parented directly to the God control, and then we tried to do anything with this, the ears would not really follow correctly, right? But if we do it the other way, so we have these selected, and then we shift select the body and parent. Now you can see over here you have the body controller, and then the two ears are just associated underneath that, and now they will follow the body controller and work how you want. And then we are going to select the body control and then shift select the God control and then parent that there. So now when we select the God control, we'll be able to move that around right there. The only thing that's left, we do have to attach the God control to the root. I did forget to do that. That's one last little thing. I'll go ahead and select my root joint. We'll select the God control first, and then the root, and then parent constraint. And then we're going to take our tail control and then also parent that to our God control. And now everything moves when we move the God control, and everything stays in place, and we can move this wherever we want. I mean, obviously we need to bind it to the skeleton first, but let me just go ahead and show you the outliner a little bit. It's starting to get a little bit confusing looking, and that's okay, because that happens with rigging sometimes. But you have your God control, and then parented right under that you have your body and your tail, and then your two ear controls are parented to the body. This is the hierarchy that you're looking for your controls. And then you want to have your tail control constrained to your tail joint, and then the same with your ears are going to be constrained to your ear joints, and then this one is going to be constrained to the body, and then this will be constrained to the root. So that is some of the setup on the controls. Now the other thing that you want to think about is, what are these controls really doing, and is the channel box really set up for what we want? Because you can change this channel box in a lot of different ways. We're going to add some attributes to it when we do the tail. We can take some things out that we know that we're not going to be using. So like for instance, on the God control, we know that we're probably going to be moving it around in the translates and rotating it, but we're not going to be really scaling it probably, because that doesn't really work very well a lot of times when you have rigged characters and you try to scale them. I mean, there's ways to set it up, but we're probably not going to be doing a lot of that. And we definitely are not going to need to change the visibility. So we can take all these channels that we know that we're not going to be using, right click and just go hide selected, and that cleans up our channel box for us. So now we know that we're only ever going to do translates and rotates on this control. This is really good too if you are setting up something for another person to animate, because it just makes it really clear what controllers are doing what and what the functions really are. Because if they went in and tried to do something with the scale, it's not going to really do anything. Same thing with this, the body control. There might be a little bit of translating So we can go ahead and leave those. I don't know how much though, so that can be something you can think about later. There's rotating is probably going to be handy, but scale and visibility, probably not. So we will hide those. And then with this, probably the same thing. Maybe some translates and rotates, but probably not scale or visibility. So we'll hide those. And then this one we will talk about in another video because we're going to add some stuff to it. But in the meantime, we definitely know that it's probably going to rotate because we're going to have a tail wag at some point. But we're probably not going to move this very much because it's attached to the body right here. So we probably don't need any of these translates. So we can get rid of those. And then also the scale and visibility. We're not going to need those either. So we can hide those as well. So that sort of cleans up our controllers a little bit. They're named how they should be. We've got zeros all through the channel box for our frozen transforms, and we have them attached to our joints and our IK handles, and we have them parented in the correct hierarchy. So that for now is going to be everything that we need for our controllers, except for this last one where we set up the tail swish. So next I'm going to show you how to bind this and clean up the binding with the painting weights tool, and then the last one we'll talk about how to set up that tail.